Hey everybody, welcome back to Old Bearded Gaming for part 3 of our Octopode Summoner run. We've got a lot to cover in this episode, all the way through completion of our 3-rune run. Let's get right back to it. If you recall from part 2, we had just finished up in the spider's nest. We're getting ready now to get towards what I call the latter third of the game, honestly. We have 2 runes. We're sitting in a pretty good spot. We're going to manipulate our skills a little bit, start boosting up that air magic to improve storm form efficiency, as well as start putting more points into unarmed combat so that we're better equipped now that Manifold Assault is sitting at 100%. So the destination for us to get a little more experience here is going to be that of the Elven Halls. Now the Elven Halls is a completely optional area. There is no rune to be had here. What is here is a whole bunch of elves that are relatively squishy. They do have some interesting powers, some magic obviously, they can summon things. There are a couple more dangerous ones to be found down on Elven Hall 3. So even if you just want to poke in here for floors 1 and 2, it's not a bad way to go to get some fairly relatively easy experience. The thing to watch out for in Elven Halls, though, is going to be that of your willpower. It is very easy to find yourself cast into the abyss when you're not ready for it. And as it would have, that happened exactly to us here. Luis, the unique mob, is particularly good at banishing folks to the abyss, but that's no reason to panic. So long as you have a form, dragon, storm, statue, etc., online, the abyss really isn't overtly difficult. We did happen to end up here in kind of a somewhat poor state, in that we didn't have a lot of magic. We were down to like 7 magic points, and that can be a little bit difficult, but so long as you stay on the move with the regeneration that we have, and that's why we prioritize purchasing a magic regeneration amulet, you're going to be getting some of that magic points back pretty quickly, and it's not that hard of a time as you would think. The focus when you get banished, particularly this early, and it's not that we don't want to come to the Abyss. There's a rune to be had here. We absolutely are going to showcase how to go after it because it is relatively simple once your Storm form and Manifold combo is really beefed up a little bit more, but it makes more sense to do it after we convert to Jiyva. And we will obviously show what that looks like. But for now, to be able to find a way out, basically stay in whatever floor it casts you to, walk around and just kill things, and it will present you with a doorway out eventually, and that's what happens here. The important thing to note when you do get your doorway is that it's going to put you right back to where you were banished, and that usually means facing the mob that banished you. Just because we have Storm Form and Manifold Assault going doesn't mean that there isn't a place to be able to still use your summons. Lightning Spire works very well in Elven Halls. Summon Giant Cactus as well if you happen to have that, particularly against the flying and floating enchanted weapons that exist in Elven Halls. Now there are some rooms that just start to get a little overwhelming inside of Elven Halls if you push a little too fast. It's always good to make sure that you leave yourself some outs. Set up some summons, some traps, lure some folks around, and remember that if you need to close the distance with Stormform, use Blink Bolt. And we'll see an example of it right here. We got a ranged attacker, we Blink Bolt right to them, doing damage, and then we can finish them off in melee range. It's incredibly effective for any of those archers and ranged elves. Additionally, the combination of adding Wereblood to your repertoire is incredibly powerful. Silence also works phenomenally well if you get into a situation with a lot of casters. Here we get our Spire out, we're in Storm form, we have Wereblood going, so we're stacking Slay bonuses, and then we cast Silence to keep people from casting on us. That's a pretty nice combination to kind of handle a room. We can see the benefit of Silence again here. We've got Annihilators, Elementalists, Demonologists. There's a lot of potential for some nasty stuff to happen, and we render a lot of it just completely useless by forcing them to have to come into melee range, which in Storm form, we're just going to slap them with the tentacle pretty hard, and that's going to be that. You do have to be careful and mindful, though, if you're going to play around with using Silence. That will keep you from obviously being able to cast any of your own spells. That includes recasting your form. And it is very easy to get going and not realize, oh shoot, I only have a couple turns left and there's quite a lot of baddies on the screen. Now we're getting Blade Masters and Master Archers. This is going to be potentially a dangerous situation because that silence is going to last longer than my form. When you realize your form's going to wear off, you need to start taking stock of what your options are and how to get out of the situation. So speaking about some of the more dangerous Desians here of the Elvish Halls, the Blade Masters can be particularly difficult even with a really good Storm form. If your unarmed combat is not at, say, level 10 or so, or above, you can have a bit of a hard time. They can just simply out DPS you, and they can certainly get some hits even with your impressive evasion. Continuing to rely on the usage of your summons is absolutely a savior. And we see here, this Blade Master gets completely taken out by the Lightning Spire. Fantastic, fantastic benefit to your repertoire. The important thing is don't lose sight of your objective. You're here for experience. We don't have any prizes for clearing it super fast or anything like that. So take your time, solve the puzzle, stay alive, keep the run going. That's what's important. And you'll walk away with a lot of experience from here. So after we're done with the elves and asserting our dominance there, it's time to get to the vault. The vault's not going to be overtly too difficult, and we're on a mission to find the entrance to the crypt. This will become important when we decide to convert to Jiyva. Inside of the vault, there are a couple things that we need to keep in mind, and some particular mobs to take note of. Ironbound Frosthearts can be dangerous if you're standing next to a wall. Always fight them in open spaces, not touching any wall, and their spells are relatively non-existent at that point, should be easy to handle. Additionally, Ironbound Convokers can begin casting a spell. They get a little red flag icon on their portrait. You see that, blink bolt to them, take them out. Otherwise, you can use Yara's Violent Unraveling or anything to take them out at range, honestly, if you have it, just to keep them from summoning a ton of ads. On the screen now, we've got a unique Marjorie. There's several uniques that can be down here in the vaults. Particularly, this one's not an overtly difficult challenge. There is still a time and a place to use your summons, and it works out pretty well here. Still worshipping Gozag. Quite a lot of these mobs can be distracted by leaving gold on the floor. Still a very viable thing to do. Don't pick up gold as you go through, and they can get distracted quite easily. And yes, you saw right, we chose to put some points in strength. Now that we have over 50 intelligence, time to buff up the damage of our unarmed combat. It's also time to change gods. We found the entrance to Crypt. Now that means that surface level Jiyva altar that we found is the perfect opportunity now for us to do our conversion. And here's what's going to happen. So first and foremost, Gozag is going to be seriously upset about our desertion. And he has the ability to speed up every mob that we come across, as well as inflict them with Berserk. Now this is why we choose to go to the Crypt. Everything inside of the Crypt is undead. They can't be Berserked, but they can be sped up. So that's really the only thing that you're going to have to be mindful of, is that everything you fight is probably going to be moving a lot faster than it normally would. This is not a problem, though, for Stormform users, and there's still, again, a lot of tools in our armory to be able to handle every challenge that the Crypt has to throw at us. Now, the way to placate Gozag is to eventually burn through enough challenges, enough enemies, to where he basically gives up on everything. And it is possible to check the status to see how mollified he is, and no longer upset at you. By going into your information screens, you can hit question mark, and then I believe it's like backslash, and then G for gods and G for Gozag, and it will tell you how upset he is at you still. Generally speaking, you need to go through all of Crypt, most of the first level of Tomb 1, and maybe a part of one of the levels of Vault before he settles down and is no longer upset. Now, a couple things inside the Crypt that we want to be mindful of. Cursed Skulls can be a little bit of a bad time. They do have a Torment ability. They can cut our hit point in half. It's not going to kill you outright, but if you're already next to something that can do damage to you, it can be a bit of a bad time. Reverence as well, absolutely can hurt. They do this unholy explosion damage, can really put a lot of hurt on it, and they can spam it back to back. So you have to be a little mindful of them in terms of what they do. Flayers as well, they're certainly primed for either a blink bolt or using manifold to solve that distance to be able to kill them quickly, so that all of that temporary negative corruption, more or less, doesn't impact and put you in a bad spot. And just a little pro tip as well, if you come across a lich or an ancient lich and they cast one of their orbs of destruction, you can blink bolt through that straight up to the lich, slap him in melee, and pretty much completely nullify any of the danger or risk that's associated with them. So pretty cool little tip. Another thing about crypts is that there can be some very interesting uniques that can pose a little bit of a challenge. So Jobo is the one that we happen to come across, and she is moderately dangerous, although because she does electrical damage, we're pretty well insulated from that being in storm form. There is another one that I tend to come across quite a lot down here called VV. They are a construct, and they have both ice and fire spells, but like any caster unique, putting on silence renders them almost completely harmless. So as we continue to explore the crypts, we're going to be gaining piety with Jiyva, and we're currently at 3 stars, just about wrapping up Crypt 3 here. So what's the big fuss about converting to Jiyva as a god? Well, we are getting substantial increases in benefits to both our health and magic point regeneration. That's the crucial draw. Combine that with amulets that already add some of that, and it's almost non-stop magic points that just allow us to spam that Manifold Assault combo, or really any other spells that we want to be doing. Eventually, once we get all the way to max piety, Jiyva will let us just simply walk into the slime vault and pick up our third rune. Incredibly easy way to get the third and final rune if that's all you're going for in your run. Additionally, from 3 stars of piety and onward, Jiyva will begin to mutate our body as a gift. And it can be usual mutations, but there are some unique ones to Jiyva, including some eyeballs that get added to our body that increase our see invisible and can add confusion. There's also some armor class and evasion that we can get. We can get little mini slimes that appear on our shoulder and can tell us where items are, etc. The thing to understand is a lot of the mutations don't have any impact if you're currently in a form. So do bear that in mind. Now, most sane people aren't even going to touch the tomb branch this early in the game. And we're technically not really doing too much in here, but we are going to do a small little lap around the outside perimeter here in Tomb 1. The reason for this is of course, Jiyva is an exploration god. They give us more piety the more things that we explore that aren't part of the slime halls. And since we're trying to max out that piety, get that third rune in the slime vault, this is a great opportunity to come and not only burn off some more of the dissatisfaction that Gozag has, but to get some of that piety up. In fact, we will go from just ticking 4 when we first stepped in here to getting our 5th star by the time we're getting ready to leave. Now, there are a couple things to note, and part of the reason why Tomb can be so dangerous is you still have to deal with the mummies, the priests, etc. There are royal mummies that exist here, and there are actually some of them that are hidden inside of the walls. So you definitely don't want to rely on using teleport to get out of a sticky situation because it can put you in a spot that you may not be able to salvage the rest of your run from. So bear that in mind. Blink, definitely a safer way to go. That or passage. Additionally, there can be teleport traps that exist. And you got to be careful about that because if a mob steps on one of those, it's going to teleport you. And again, it can have unpredictable results that may not be desirable, could put you in a very bad situation. And while it may not seem like this is an overtly dangerous place to be, it really kind of is. So play it smart, be safe. I've actually had people pop into my games a couple times while I've been doing this particular part of a run. Really just amazed and asking questions of, oh my gosh, you're XL 20, 21, 22. What are you doing in Tomb? And it's like, well, okay, I'm not really here. We're just working to get some of that piety from Jiyva and make Gozag less upset at us. So folks do find this to be particularly peculiar. It's not something that most people are capable of doing, and it would be almost nearly impossible without our storm form to be able to handle some of the surprises that can get thrown at us. So long as you don't press your luck too far and know when it's time to turn tentacle or tail and run, This can be a pretty lucrative way to get a little bit of experience points, a little more piety with Jiyva. Just be aware of Torment. It kind of sucks. It's usually a good indicator to bail. So as we get ready to go back into the vault and get the last little level that we need here of piety for Jiyva, we take a peek at the skills, realize we're sitting pretty good. Targets are good. Anything that we invest into fighting, unarmed combat, dodging, etc. is going to help keep us alive. Adding additional spells to our repertoire is important as well. And honestly, one of the best is that of Animate Dead or Death Channel. Now, Animate Dead will come online a lot sooner with very few points in Necromancy to be able to get it going, but it gives us the Reap status when we cast it. And everything that we kill while that Reap status is active has an opportunity to convert into a minion for us. And these are pretty substantial minions. Animate Dead lasts, they don't disappear until you leave the floor. And that's a huge benefit to any summoner. So usually about the time you get down to vault level 4, maybe halfway through it or so, as was the case in this run, you'll get that last little level of piety that you need from Jiyva, and they're going to open up the door to the vaults for you on the last level of the slime pit. So it's a quick little victory march. We pop down here, we take a peek. We play around a little bit with passage just because I'm not overtly accustomed to using it a bunch, but it is possible had you come here before and caused some of the slimes of Jiyva to clear out, they wouldn't have consumed so many of the items on the ground if there was some stuff that you absolutely needed. It is important to note, though, that the slimes of Jiyva will not eat artifacts, so that's always beneficial. The best stuff is going to be left for you to take a peek, but say hi to the royal jelly, and let's get ready for some real fun. Now, doing Vault 5 is completely unnecessary at this point because we have our 3 runes. We can just simply go down to Zot, get ready to win the game, but why would we miss up on this opportunity for really quite a lot of fun? Now, there are a number of ways to tackle Zot 5, but one of my most favorite ways to do it is easily with this summoner build. We start out by popping a Potion of Brilliance, and that's going to boost all of our magic. We pop a Might Potion as well, which is going to help with the unarmed combat damage. And we're going to descend after changing into our Storm form and get ready to cast Animate Dead once we get down there. Now, because we are using Animate Dead, we're not going to be doing any of the stair hopping up and down or any of that nonsense. In fact, we kind of want them to cast Mark on us so that we draw enemies to us. We want to kill as many things as possible while we have that Reap status up. Now, as a safety precaution, the Scroll of Poison is going to keep most things from coming at us from the other 4 little vault locations. And this is just to kind of slow the incoming amount so we don't get overwhelmed and we have a chance to convert pretty much all of these guys into Animate Dead minions for us. And the minions that we're getting are no slouches. I mean, we've got Vault Sentinels, we've got Giants, we've got Shadow Dragons, we've got Elves, we've got Stone Giants, there's Titans, there's just Gold Dragons, Trolls, Yaktar Captains. As you can see, this builds up into a pretty sizable army pretty quickly. And this entire time, we haven't moved from the stairs. We're sitting here spamming Manifold Assault. In fact, we're going to get pretty low on magic points here. It's even beneficial to go ahead and pop a potion of magic to get yourself back up to at least half strength on that, just so that we can go out there and kill even more while that Reap status is active. Now, the other spell that we have going is Wereblood, which we popped right when we came down. It's going to accelerate the killing. We cap out at the +9 slaying bonus, and this just really makes that Manifold Assault even more efficient at doing what it does and killing everything as it makes its way to the edges of our view. So with the initial wave and first responders taken care of, we can go ahead and start kind of inching our way towards one of the vaults. You pick a random direction, whichever way you like. We start heading northeast. We can see some of the loot, some really interesting stuff actually that we just never will be able to use with a caster. That +15 patent armor would have been something to kind of play with for sure, such as the life of playing an Octopode. So one of the reasons we go with this approach and build such a massive army is to shield us from some potentially very dangerous uniques that have an opportunity to appear here in Vault 5. While we clear out the Ogre Magi and Vault Wardens here, they will soon be replaced by one of the most dangerous uniques in the game, and that is of the Angel Menace. Menace presents some very unique challenges and can be an absolute end runner if you're not prepared to deal with their kind of unique approach to what they can do to you. As you see, Menace has a silence ability, as well as they can cast Mass Confusion. They have a minor healing ability as well. We are staying at edge of their silence because of the mass quantity of summons that we have. So we're able to position and still get off some manifold assaults if we wanted to. In this situation, we're starting to run a little low on magic, and I don't want to just willy-nilly start consuming all of our magic potions. It's time to use Maxwell's Captive Coupling. This spell, you have to hold still, you can't move, it gives you the charge status for a couple of turns, but then it simply deletes whatever the nearest monster in your line of sight is. And in our case, that happened to be Menace. Pretty simple if you can pull it off. MCC is a total game-winning spell. It doesn't have the most flair. As you saw, there wasn't any animation to it. Things just simply ceased existing. So it's kind of a negative 20 on the coolness factor, but it will win games for you, that's for sure. As we continue exploring, we finally come across the rune, the silver rune for Vault 5, making our total count now 4. A word of caution on using the auto explore. It will continue to explore even outside of form. And as you saw, we came across a dead lich, had to immediately pop into our storm form, handle it, only to then be faced with Frederick. Frederick is another game-ending unique, very, very dangerous. Their spells are incredibly potent. Could probably blast you for easily 100 plus damage. No kidding. This is one of those situations where popping silence really is a huge benefit because even though their melee attacks can hurt, we're sitting at 51 evasion. They're not going to hit us, at least not likely. So if you folks remember back to the previous episode, we came across a vault that we probably likely weren't going to be able to open, but believe it or not, we acquired 6 scrolls of blinking during our time clearing out through Vault 5. That's enough to open up this treasure trove. A quick word of caution about treasure troves. You got to make sure that you have some inventory room, first and foremost, before you get in there. Otherwise, you're going to come across stuff that you want, and you don't have any room for it. And being a follower of Jiyva, one of the downsides is, in particularly small spaces like this, it doesn't take long before slimes are summoned to start destroying items. So very quickly, a lot of anything that would be good in here, which incidentally there was not, is going to disappear very quickly. So bear that in mind. It is one of the drawbacks of being a follower of Jiyva, though really no harm, no foul. To be perfectly honest, I would have probably preferred to keep the 6 scrolls of blinking, but when you can blink yourself or cast passageway, really unnecessary. So this now leads us to the depths, and the depths are really nothing spectacular. You do have to be mindful about your elemental resistances. Highly advisable to carry some plus cold, plus fire resistances. You, of course, are naturally immune to poison and have good electric resists while you're in storm form, but being able to switch on the fly with your rings can be very important. As you see, fire dragons, ice dragons, giants, etc., all very common down here in the depths. Another nice little pro tip is be mindful of your mini-map. If you notice little areas that aren't completely explored, or you get that message, partially explored, can't reach some places, it's worthwhile to take a look to see where something might be hiding. And if you have any wands of digging, you can make it pretty much kind of a non-issue to take a peek and find some interesting stuff. In our case, we found a portal to Abyss. And believe it or not, that's exactly what we want. It's time to go get the 5th and one of the easiest runes in this run. At this point in our character development, there really isn't anything in the Abyss that's going to pose that much of a challenge to us. Really, it's about minding your magic points and making sure that with your regeneration, you're not overcasting your Manifold Assault. We're not extending so far that we can't recast our Storm form and just handle stuff in melee if we're not able to spend points on using Manifold Assaults, etc. But ultimately, we need to work our way down to Abyss 3. From level 3 and lower is when the rune can start to show up. And really, the strategy here is pretty straightforward. Handle anything that the Abyss throws at you, and just kind of pick a direction and start walking. Eventually, you'll either get teleported, you'll get dropped down another level, or you'll get a notification like here that says, hey, your surroundings have changed, you detect the Abyssal Room. And it shows up as just a tiny little speck on your mini-map, so you really have to kind of look for it. And in our case, we got a very favorable location. A lot of times the Abyssal Rune will be in kind of a little mini encased shrine or temple or whatever they want to call it in the Abyss. There is no rhyme or reason inside of here. But you're going to need a Wand of Digging, most likely, to be able to make things a little easier on yourself. Otherwise, you'll have to just explore around and find the entrance. In this case, we were able to dig and get a clear opening to the rune. Have to handle some mobs here. And really, the reason for just kind of staying put and killing all of these mobs on the screen instead of just making a beeline for the rune is we're trying to summon a gate. And that's what we do. So we have our exit immediately right there. We're able to pick up the rune, clear everything off. We can check to see if we got any malmutations, which we didn't. But if we did, they wouldn't last very long once we went back into the depths. Pretty simple, nothing complicated to it. And there we have it, our 5 runes. For a 3-rune run, 5 was pretty easy to come by because of our conversion to Jiyva. Now it's time to put an end to things and go fetch the orb. Really, nothing changes through the rest of depths. You're going to be making your small little armies as you have ability to do so, being mindful of your elemental resistances, and you don't need much. In our case, we just have 1 pip of both fire and cold, and that's sufficient. To be able to pretty much handle anything that happens down here. If you find yourself getting a little overwhelmed with one element or the other, make sure you have rings that you can swap around. Clearing out Depths 4, we find the entrance to Zot, and now we're in the final stretch. The Realm of Zot really doesn't add anything too overtly dangerous, but there are combinations that can occur that can make things a little bit difficult. As it turns out, in this particular run, I have never come across more Quicksilver Dragons in any run that I've made through Zot. Now, Quicksilver Dragons are probably the biggest challenge that you're going to face as a form user, simply because their breath can kick you out of your storm form, which, if you're being careless and you're tabbing around and just attacking stuff, can be very dangerous. You can misclick and auto-attack when you didn't mean to, when you should have been recasting your form. It can put an end to your run. But it's no fault of the build. Again, the build can completely handle it. Our strategy remains the same. We build our little armies, we use what spells we have available to us, and we clear everything out. Now, we've come across them before, but liches can appear down here, several different versions of them. Be mindful of their orbs of destruction, but as we already talked about, we can blink bolt through them. Additionally, if things get really spicy and dangerous, we can always pop some silence, cast that, and basically remove all of the potential dangerousness that liches possess. Now, golden dragons on their own, really not much of a problem, but they can be buffed with the berserk status from the Moths of Wrath, which are fairly common down here in Zot. So be mindful if you see those things around, but honestly, every time they pop on the screen, it's Manifold Assault time. Kill them as quickly as possible, and really not that big of a deal. So the last level of the 3-rune, in our case 5-rune run game, Zot 5, worth popping one of the Scrolls of Magic mapping just to see what direction we need to head. In our case, it's going to be south. You can take some time and look over the map, move things around and see what the various traps are, what your best path is going to be. Ultimately, you want to avoid the teleport traps, etc. So in our case, we head off to the right-hand side here, where we've got just a net trap waiting for us. With Animate Dead, the Orb Guardians make fantastic minions, although we don't really rely on them too much. They're just kind of there. Honestly, I really kind of value having the Animate Dead minions more for their confusion effect that they potentially can put on mobs, just keeping things distracted while we get in here and handle our business. Orbs of Fire, always very dangerous, should be treated with respect, but in our case, they're really not anything to write home about. We are well equipped at this point in our run to be able to handle things, and only inconvenienced by burning through our mana maybe a little bit too quickly. And if that happens, as we see here, doesn't hurt to turn around, retreat a little bit, regenerate some of that mana. It's not going to take very many turns to do so, and then come back at it. So with the coveted Orb of Zot in our sight, let's take just a moment here as we speed up the gameplay a couple times here to showcase our collection of the Orb of Zot and our escape from the dungeon, to just reflect a little bit on the build itself and some things to be mindful of, some tips, some thoughts as we close everything out here. Probably the biggest danger, and this is true really of honestly any character you play in DCSS, to a successful run, is yourself. Hubris absolutely is real, overconfidence is real, and in just about every situation, and you see it time and time again on the Reddit, people posting situations, morgue files going, what could I have done, what didn't I see? It's our decisions that ultimately end what would be successful run. In the case of this particular build, I think it's very easy, especially once you get a storm form or a dragon form up and going and have the manifold assault, which again gets fundamentally changed in the new trunk version that they're working on now, 0.30, to only be able to hit 2 enemies at max instead of the 4, but it'll still be very useful. To just rely on that as being your only means of you're really handling situations here in the dungeon. Best advice number 1 is to remember the tools in your toolbox. We have a lot of things available to us. MCC is a fantastic spell, albeit not overtly very flashy, but will completely delete something if it needs to be gone and it's in your way. There are a number of other ways to do this. You can absolutely play this, especially a 3-rune game, as a 100% true to form summoner. You're going to need to get Servitor going, probably Tentacles going with the Gateway. You're definitely going to want some of the bigger summons that are available to be able to flesh things out, but there's other ways to build an army with just your innate summoner ability. So it is completely viable to be able to do that. It's just a different style of gameplay. Advice number 2 is making sure that you're making good choices with the gear selection, particularly with an Octopode. Having those 8 tentacles and using rings as our only means of being able to modify what our character does in terms of stats and whatnot can play a very crucial role. And in some situations, obviously, you have to play into what the dungeon gives you, but making the right choices can help get spells up and going earlier, and you'll have an easier time of handling the dungeon. So as we exit the dungeon, we've escaped with our 5 runes, with the Orb of Zot. This is a complete and total success, and one that had the potential. Oh, the memes. It could have been there. We could have been 69th. We just missed it by, we're talking just a couple hundred points here. It's really ridiculous how close that was. Actually, it wasn't even hundreds of points. It was 11. 11 points was the difference between 69th and 70th, but I digress. The end result is a win, and that's what we're after with these runs and playthrough. The mark file will be pasted in the video description. And this is going to do it for part 3 of this run, the final part. There is a quote-unquote part 4 that'll be coming very shortly, and that's going to showcase a different run where I recorded towards the latter part of a 15-rune full collection run for your guys' viewing pleasure to be able to see just exactly how powerful Octopode Summoner can be. So I invite you guys to check that out when it pops out. But I want to thank you guys for sticking around through this journey. I hope you guys found this useful, interesting, enlightening, and possibly even entertaining. We do our best. Last thing to take of note here, How much did we do? How frequently did we do it? Unarmed combat taking over most of the damage there, coupled with our Manifold Assault. I will spoil just a little bit. In our 15 rune run, Manifold Assault ends up just over 3,500 uses. So we rely on that pretty heavily through the extended game. This is Old Bearded Gaming, everybody. Take care. We'll see you again next time.